alright, that's enough of that. Let's tell my story with Cyberpunk 2077. In 2012, I, just as many of the gaming community, was incredibly excited by the announcement of Cyberpunk 2077. Being a fan of the aesthetic and message of films like Ghost in the Shell and Blade Runner, and a follower of the Cyberpunk lore, I couldn't wait to see what Polish developers CD Projekt Red would do with the popular tabletop RPG. So I pre-ordered it. I didn't even have the console that I would need to play it, but I didn't care. I wanted that game. But then the game just kind of disappeared. We were all still talking about it in hushed tones as if it would disappear like a nervous fawn if it heard us, but there was nothing official that said that the game was coming. The Witcher 3 came and went, and we all got quietly more excited when we adventured with Geralt through the game's massive open world. I mean, if this game is that good, imagine what Cyberpunk could be like. But still, we waited to hear more. 2018, and it finally happened. We had a release date. April 16th, 2020. So I had to redo my pre-order because for some reason Amazon had gotten the product pages confused, which for some reason meant that mine no longer existed or something, but that was fine. It was coming. January 2020, we've got more news, and it's not good. The game will now be released on September 17th, 2020. That's fine, I thought. More delays just means they're perfecting the game. Excellent, at least it's coming out. Then, midway through the worst year on record comes July with more bad news. Another delay. This time to November 19th. And then, unfortunately, just a few days before that release window, we were told again. Time for another delay. This time to December the 10th, almost a month after the previous date. At this point, I wondered if we'd ever actually see the game release at all, and I get the feeling a large portion of its audience felt the same way. But December the 9th came with no notification of a shifted order as I'd had so many times before, and on the 10th, it arrived. So it's finally here, many years in the making, and arguably 2020's most anticipated and delayed game is now in my PlayStation. But was it worth the almost 8-year wait? Find out with me today on today's review of Cyberpunk 2077. I think I need to start by addressing the elephant in the room that comes with any kind of talking about Cyberpunk 2077. The state in which the game was released. It's just unfinished, plain and simple. So many people have talked about their experience on the game, so perhaps it's not right for me to make any kind of comment on them generally, so instead, I'll just go with mine. So I'm playing on a PlayStation 4 Pro, and while I haven't had it as bad as those playing on the base system, I have had a time with the game that could be charitably called unsatisfactory, and realistically, dangerously close to unplayable. I've had characters warp into my car, sending my vehicle flying through the air. I've had police officers constantly warp to my position as I try to escape, and texture pop in that looks like the game designers are drawing it in real time in front of me. And that's just the stuff that makes you laugh. Unfortunately, there are an incredible number of issues that plague the game to a degree that can make playing it a chore. Often my frame rate drops to what feels like the 10s, or even freezes while things still technically happen in the background. But the worst of all, to me, is the almost constant crashing. In my first few hours of the game, I had 4 hard crashes. It wasn't an hourly occurrence, I mean I could almost time when the next crash was coming. This is, obviously, very bad. Especially when you consider how often the game was delayed and the promises that the developers gave us the game neared released. All on a console that, while not next generation, is certainly no slouch. I mean, the thing can play Red Dead Redemption at 4K with HDR enabled. Honestly though, at this point, texture pop-in, frame drops, and even to a degree the crashes I believe can be fixed, but my confidence in the long-term stability of the game? Absolutely not. At this point, every time I sit down to play, I am equal parts expectant and prepared for some kind of issue that will cause my game to come to a grinding halt. But let's forget the glitches and bugs for a second and see if underneath there is a game worth playing trying to escape. Upon first impressions, yes, there is. Right off the bat, Cyberpunk 2077's mission statement is obvious: to look as cool as possible, and at this, it absolutely succeeds. The neon-lit streets of Night City look incredible, especially under the game's impressive rain model. The roads shine slick with water, reflecting the brightly lit buildings with their surfaces. The cars are absolutely cyberpunk, with all the angles and mad-looking wheels a fan of the look could want. The separation between city and desert is equally impressive, between the pure excess of civilization and the lonely desolation of the outside world. And it all feels very lived in. Nothing is completely immaculate and in most cases looks well used. It's certainly taken a lot of influence from the greats like Blade Runner and even to a degree Demolition Man. It is an incredible realisation of a cyberpunk world. One of my favourite aspects in this regard is the clothing designs, most of which I would wear in real life. I love the range of boots and jackets, and some of the masks and glasses are just insane. It all helps bring the game to life. But here's the thing, the look of Cyberpunk is only half of the equation. Now, here I believe is where Cyberpunk's biggest miss lies. It completely ignores one of the most important aspects of Cyberpunk as an idea. You see, Cyberpunk is obviously based on the anti-establishment ideas of punk, only in the oversaturated capitalist hellscape of the future. The whole point is to not embrace the excess or the rule of corporations and fascist police forces. It's to fight against it, to be different. In Cyberpunk, the gangs should be the embodiment of this, the people standing up to the world around them. In Cyberpunk 2077, however, everything's been reversed. Instead of fighting against a corrupt police force, you're fighting the very gangs that should be fighting the corporations and the cops themselves. I should not get so-called street cred for helping the police. This is not Cyberpunk. They should have just called it Cyber Mercenary and called it a day. They even missed the mark in regards to gender. A lot of buzz surrounded the game when it came to gender for a long time before release. You'll be able to choose your genitals no matter the gender of your character. There will be gay romance options. But again, they sorely missed the mark. I mean, in a game where I can choose my genitals, why can't I choose my pronouns? Or why can't I change the body type of my character to better represent who I am, or who I want to be? Trans representation in the game is also borderline insulting. You get the feeling that while there were trans people present in the game, the writers and developers never actually spoke to a real, actual trans person. Now, I am not trans, so I'll leave more criticism in this regard to trans people themselves, and I encourage you to seek out their experiences and criticisms. But then even I can tell there's something really not right here. This massive miss in the underlying principles of Cyberpunk downright ruins the game for me. And that's a shame because the game does some things really very well. The gameplay for the most part is very solid. Take the shooting for example. It's quick, responsive and feels great. The range of weapons here is brilliant, from submachine guns to pistols and sniper rifles. The melee as well is very impressive. Weapons have a tangible heft, and beheading a foe with a single swipe of your blade feels heavy. This is a very accomplished fighting system, and one that is only made more impressive by the incredible RPG progression system. You can of course gain points through levels that you can invest in your core stats. What is cool is how you gain your skill points. As you use certain skills such as sneaking around or grabbing someone from behind, you gain levels. Through these levels you gain skill points that can be invested in any skills that you might want. It's simple but deceptively deep and great to use. Each upgrade feels useful, and it's exciting to see what each new upgrade will bring. This is all unfortunately let down by some strange control issues. In some sections they're just a little weird. Driving is floaty and all over the place as cars and bikes never really react to inputs as you might expect. Controls in menus are also weird. Sometimes one button accepts things and in another time it's a different one. It's particularly noticeable in the character creator. There are just so many baffling control decisions, from the way you pan around your character to how sometimes the D-pad works and sometimes it just doesn't. On the topic of the character creator, I am of two minds about it. In some ways it's great, offering a fantastic level of customization, but sometimes, as I suggested before, it's weirdly restrictive. I can make my face look crazy, but only as long as it fits within a certain facial structure. I can be any skin colour I want, but none look natural. I can choose the length of my masculine genitals, but there's only one option for the feminine. This creator does allow you to create a character that will always look good, but in a world that's supposed to thrive on the unconventional, it certainly feels weird that the best you can do is good. Thankfully the story is better, as long as you don't consider it a cyberpunk story. Now, I don't want to go so far as to call it excellent, because it's just not. It's written well enough that you know who the characters are, and it moves uncommonly quickly for such a large RPG. But it never quite hits the same heights as CD Projekt's previous outing, The Witcher 3. The characters themselves just aren't quite there for me, and while their motivations and actions are easy to follow, they just lack depth. The way the story is told makes up for its lack of depth, however, and makes for a compelling narrative with a strong core and interesting direction. It's split into 3 parts that run alongside each other and interweave well throughout the story's length. It's very cleverly done, and neglecting one thread for too long can irreparably change the outcome at the end of the game. This is something that I've not seen a video game story do before, and it's exciting to see where storytelling like this in video games can take us. The true strength of the story, however, lies in its casting and voice acting. This is some of the best voice acting I have ever experienced. Player character V is fantastically well realised in both masculine and feminine form, and does a great job of selling the character. Even the side characters sound excellent, from the main story characters to the random NPCs you find on the streets. The strongest performance, however, is, of course, Keanu Reeves as the all-important Johnny Silverhand. It's almost like the man was born to play him, as he approaches the role with gusto. Every word he says drips with presence as he steals the show whenever he appears. But beyond that, I wish I had more positive to say. I love the way the game looks and the voice acting, I enjoy the shooting and the RPG elements. I just wish they'd nailed the underlying point of Cyberpunk, and that my experience wasn't ruined by bugs, glitches and truly bizarre control decisions. So in the end, Cyberpunk 2077 has 2 main issues, the first being the state that the game was released in. Honestly, it's not completely inexcusable, but it is definitely disappointing, particularly after the game was delayed so many times. From the ridiculous texture pop-in to the frequency of crashes and freezes, there is just no avoiding the fact that the game is unfinished. But these issues can be fixed by updates. No, that shouldn't be the case, but it is something of a silver lining when it comes to the playability of the game. Therefore, the bigger of the 2 main issues is just how badly CD Projekt Red has completely missed the point of Cyberpunk as a concept. They focused too much on the way the world looks and glossed over the anti-establishment message that all Cyberpunk stories should follow. I mean, there's not much less punk than working with the police to make more money so you can buy a fancy new car. And this issue, unfortunately, can't really be fixed by updates. Ultimately then, Cyberpunk gets some things right. The look, the gameplay, the casting, but it's ruined not just by the obvious glitches and bugs, but more importantly by the story and the underlying message. A shame, but I can only hope that DLC can fix it in the future. You can tell there's a good game that wants to get out, but it needs a lot of work in the story and the glitches before it's worth playing. Is this the game that I'd hoped for in 2013? No. And that's extremely disappointing. Thanks for watching this video. I've been Matt and you're on The Den. Now, I realise that this is a very controversial topic, so I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Leave us a comment to join the conversation. Anyway, Playing by Series returns on Monday, and I'll be making updates each time that Cyberpunk is updated, so make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss a thing. Thanks again for watching, and remember, in the meantime, stay safe.